Oh, where to start? Such a great question. I was reflecting on my career and how I came to be where I am, and I think what stands out for me most is when I was a child, my curiosity and where that took me. So I was an extremely curious child.
Aha.
If you asked my parents, I was always asking lots of questions. I was always wandering off. I love to explore and have lots of little adventures on my own. I was on my own for a while until my brother was born, so I had lots of imaginary friends, very creative, made up all these little different scenarios, and often you would find me doing the most inappropriate things like falling into duck ponds and water and climbing up trees, and ruining the beautiful clothes that my mother used to dress me in. So I had this, innate curiosity around, how do things work, how do people work, and very early on in my, childhood, I decided that I wanted to be a nurse, followed closely by a teacher, and then a lawyer. And interestingly, I've not really achieved any of those things, and ended up in a profession which sort of combines all three to some degree. Um, so I think that's probably my earliest memory of being curious. And as I've gone through my career, I haven't had a traditional career path as such. I went to university and got my qualifications. Came out of university as a young graduate, thinking everyone's going to want me. I'm going to be the most fabulous thing ever.
And you
And
are?
and then very quickly learned that there were 100,000 others just like me, all competing for the same roles. So learning how to reinvent myself came at a very early age, and my career didn't necessarily start out directly in HR. But what it did teach me was to make the most of every opportunity, be curious about what you can learn, and what that role can give you, regardless of what it is and where it is and who it's working for. So, I've taken a very winding path in my career to end up where I am today.
Fantastic. Well, what does a people experience professional do? What's the crux of your role?
What I love is being curious.
Okay, so
Um,
that's the core component, being curious about other people, about role fit around.
Around organizations, around role fit, around career.
Excellent.
I do a lot of coaching with individuals, and being curious just comes naturally to me. I love to ask questions about what's really going on. So what's going on below the surface. And
Yeah.
I think if you look at any kind of people experience activities, whether that's that could be recruitment, it could be coaching, it could be leadership development. If you're not curious about why people are participating and why they want to learn and grow, I think you're missing an opportunity to get to know them as an individual, and then really like leverage their skills and abilities and harness them to achieve their full potential.
Yeah. What a wonderful way to talk about where you've ended up in life, coming from a viewpoint of curiosity. And you said curiosity and learning in the same sentence there. And it sparked me because I talk about the fact that curiosity creates a whole different question set. So when I'm curious, I ask questions to learn, to discover, to find out, and rather than to judge or to win. So that makes sense. I made perfect sense of what you were saying then. It all came together. It also blends in with what I read about you on LinkedIn. You said your passion is working with ambitious and talented professionals to be the best they can. How's that played out, and how does that tie in with curiosity?
So I'm in the really fortunate position to be able to work with a range of different organizations and a range of leaders. So I work with leaders that are really experienced in senior roles, up to those that are wanting to become leaders, so emerging leaders as well. And I think what defines great leadership for me is that innate sense of curiosity and growth and learning. I think when we feel like we've learned everything and we know everything, it's like, well,
Pack it
what's
up.
it's like it's what's next, and you know, and I struggle with struggle with the notion of there'll never be something else that you can't learn.
Yeah.
So for me, working with leaders to be the best they can, they have an innate sense of, what's next for me? What else can I learn? How can I build on my skills and abilities and stretch myself in new directions, new roles, new organizations? So that whole personal growth, that curiosity and learning is really tied up with, working with ambitious and talented individuals to be the best they can.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So what does personal growth mean to you? Let's see where that sits with you as a process, personal growth. But also I'm really interested in where you see self-awareness and feedback fitting into that picture. Double-barreled question, sorry.
Well, I think that, for me, the three tie in very naturally. So personal growth can be organic. So you come across a
Yeah,
situation where
yeah,
you've got to, like, what do I do next? How do I apply my skills and abilities, whether that's personally or professionally? I think the role of, particularly feedback, can be helpful in identifying some of those blind spots.
yeah.
One of the great books that I've read is, What Got You Here Won't Get You There by Marshall
Yes.
Goldsmith.
Yeah.
And, a key thing is, you can be successful in spite of yourself. So we go through life, we learn behaviors and strategies that are really useful to us at certain periods of time or to deal with certain circumstances. And we create a link between the two. So I become successful because I operate in this way, or I've got these skills, or I've got that, this particular experience. And that can create blind spots for us where, we're not open to new ideas or new ways of doing things or new technologies or learning about how things are done differently or in different industries. And I think when you look at, organizations who have been blindsided by, emerging organizations. So for example, taxis and Uber, like they were completely blindsided by that, by the introduction of, some kind of like
Absolutely. Yeah,
rideshare arrangement, because we've been doing this for such a long time. We know
yeah.
what we're doing, like we're experts in the field. So not holding up the mirror and going, okay, what's next for us? What can be coming from where? And being really curious and exploring around what are other industries doing that aren't may not even be relevant to who we are and what we
Mm.
do. Where's the next thing? What do we need to look out for? How do we remain relevant? And I think that's particularly key in leadership. How do I retain my relevancy in this complex, changing world where every day brings new opportunities and new challenges?
Yeah. And I think that whole concept of remaining relevant and future pacing, future gazing is so bound up with our own, not just self-awareness, but also our reflective practice. Is that something that rings true for you?
Absolutely. And I think, the leaders that I work with, particularly at the senior levels, a common theme and a common thing that we talk about is, you know, I'm responsible for my reflexivity. Like,
Yeah,
I don't get feedback. I ask for feedback and I just don't get it. And it's a struggle for people who particularly thrive on feedback in terms of their learning and their growth and their curiosity around what do I need to improve on and what's next for me. So being able to be self-reflective and that self-awareness and holding up the mirror and going, yeah, am I bringing my best self every single day? What could I be doing better? How did I handle that situation? What 50% do I own of, that thing that didn't go particularly well or as planned?
yeah. Or the
Become
one that did.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh,
It becomes increasingly important as you, I guess, progress through your career, particularly into senior roles.
yeah, I agree. I also believe there is something about the difference between a junior person seeking feedback and a senior leader seeking feedback. And I think in my experience, what I've noticed is that a less experienced person is clear around why they're seeking the feedback, because it's absolutely about growth and fitting in and making sense and relevancy, etc., etc. I often wonder if more senior leaders have lost touch with that and feel that they need to seek feedback from people above them or peers, that they really don't delve into what's the impact I'm having, to get it back to that simple level. Is that something you've seen?
Uh, I've seen both.
Yeah.
I think, you know, creating a feedback culture in organizations sounds easy, but it's a lot harder than,
Yes.
than we expect. And, I work with a range of different psychometrics and different tools and, culture
Yep.
assessments. And in every organization, one of the questions I ask is, how do you deal with feedback that you don't necessarily like, or
Or
you
agree with.
or agree with, or you don't want to hear, or it makes you feel bad because every organization wants to be one of the best places to work. And the response that they give to that question is very telling for me.
Yes.
So, if you only get feedback when things go wrong or they're looking for someone to blame, you're unlikely to actively seek feedback
Mm,
because that's a difficult process to go through.
mm,
So balancing constructive feedback with recognition for work well done, I
mm.
think is easier in early career for leaders to manage those in their early career. I think when you get more senior, you have to be far more explicit with your intent around why you are
Yeah.
seeking that feedback.
Yeah.
Um,
I completely agree. It's a different question that I'm asking at that stage. It's also, I think, I was working with some women in Sydney recently, and an inexperienced woman sought feedback from the CEO of the organisation, and it paused the organisation. You could feel people taking in a breath, and I thought, I get because why you're taking that breath, because it doesn't seem usual. I also completely behind that young woman, because she realised that she had no visibility at that higher level. And it wasn't even that she wanted that. She literally wanted to know, what is it that's going to get me ahead here? And I believe the CEO is the person to give it to me. I thought that was I hadn't experienced that before. I hadn't seen a young person take that huge initiative, and it could have fallen flat. But to their credit, that senior leader recognised what was happening in that conversation and took the time to help develop, to give some feedback around personal growth. So, if you take a risk, sometimes it can pay off, and be part of your portfolio of achievements, really.
Oh, and I think, I'm seeing that a lot more from, people in their early careers. When
Yeah,
you look at those who have been in the workforce for quite a long time, or, for a number of years, there's a way that you should behave and there's a way that you should treat
correct.
those in senior positions or in
Mm,
hierarchy.
yeah,
And that happens across every organization in every sector. Those coming into their careers now, they're far more brave than I would have been at that point in my career
mm,
to, put my hand up, offer my opinion,
yep,
seek feedback from the CEO, because that's just not done. You don't
no,
do that because you're only, X years old, you're only in this kind of
yeah,
position, so know your place.
mm,
And, to their credit, people in their early careers now, they're not letting that stop them.
no. Well, they've grown up in households where their consult has been sought, where they've been asked to contribute to conversations and to outcomes. And even you think about universities, and there's a lot more of group work where they're asked to work together and then report back. So it sort of makes sense that there's been an evolution around how people see personal growth and how they approach it, particularly at that self-awareness level. Yeah, interesting. Hadn't even thought about that when we first started thinking around this as a topic. Um, I I'm really interested about the whole lifelong learning. I talk about lifelong habits around learning, um, learning how to say no, learning how to say yes, knowing when to sit forward, knowing when to sit back. So there are all sorts of things I believe that play into that whole setting yourself up for future success. But lifelong learning, I know, isn't just a buzzword for you, because you're currently studying your, let me check, your Masters of Science, majoring in organizational psychology. So, first of all, kudos, huge, huge thing to be doing. So, where does your motivation for lifelong learning come from, do you think? And how do you sustain it? Because you've also got a busy life. How does it all work together?
With a lot of sticky tape at times, to be honest. Um, I started studying my master's in 2019, and 2019, Yvonne thought that that was a fabulous idea after having a very long break from any kind of, I guess, formal education.
Yeah.
And that was a very rude shock to the system.
But what prompted it first, before you talk about the shock? What was the motivation to, well, now I'm going to study? Like,
I
where does
think
that come from?
I think there's a couple of things. One, my parents were both migrants to Australia. They struggled in a country where they weren't able to speak the language or get work. So I've grown up in that kind of house where you do the best
Incredible.
that you can in
Yep.
whatever work that you do. So, my dad, he's retired slash not retired in the building industry. And I grew up working on building sites.
Okay.
So, and we had property and a farm. And so I guess, my options, and I lived in a small town. So my options were stay in the small town and get married, work on the farm and have, manual labor, or actually have a crack at study and, go to university.
Yeah.
So, I was the first one in our family to go and do tertiary study. So I
Wow.
went to uni, and I worked and put myself through uni and did that. And I think from then, even though it wasn't probably that's my strongest desire, it did spark that in me. So
Yeah.
to engage in topics that I had never even thought existed, do group projects, and that really sparked that desire to continually learn,
Mm.
but in multiple different ways. So,
Okay.
I'm studying my master's now, which is formal education. But when I look back at my career, I have moved between roles every 2 to 3 years.
Okay.
And even in the same organization, I've moved between roles. One, not because I'm not happy
Mm.
in what I'm
Or
doing.
bored. It's not about boredom, is it?
It's what other value can I add? How can I use my skills? How can I learn something new and, reshape and redefine myself,
Yep.
as a valuable organization member that can contribute in a range of different ways.
Mm.
So I've done a lot of professional development and have a range of different accreditations. And for me, that does bring some satisfaction and learning how to apply those skills and apply those tools in various scenarios. What prompted me, I guess, to do my master's was understanding how organizations operate and hang together and what was the theory behind it. So I've got a lot of practical experience and knowledge, as a HR professional. And this was really understanding, how do organizations function? What prompts organizations to behave in a particular way through their teams and their people? How can you enact change successfully, particularly around culture change? What drives relationships in organizations between leaders and their teams that are effective or not effective? How can you make them more effective? So the theory behind it was the driving force for me. And I'm in the final stages and I can see the light at the end of the tunnel now.
Well, congratulations. I think it's a huge achievement. I'd like to pick up on a few things. One is when I no, when you were talking through that, you mentioned the value add. So it wasn't that I'm bored in a role, or every 3 years I just need to do something different, or I'm trying to develop my career in a particular way. It was much more basic than that. It was purely and simply, how else can I add value to this organization in a way that satisfies me, but also is of value to the organisation, which I will say is a huge innate female strength and a female way of evolving. But it also goes hand in hand with your whole conversation earlier on about your childhood of curiosity.
It does. It does. And one of my core values is mastery. So
Yeah,
always striving and
there you
learning,
go.
you know,
Yeah,
to develop myself. And I think, whether regardless of what your personal values are, when we look at how quickly the world is shifting and how organizations are shifting, and what capabilities they have and need now versus even 3 to 5 years ago, and what they might need in the future with all of your AI, robotics. I think that value add piece of critical thinking, curiosity,
yeah,
you know is really going to come to the forefront of being important when you're looking at, yes, some roles and some kind of jobs will be replaced, but they will be replaced with something different. So how can you prepare yourself for that? What can you do? How proactive can you be? Rather than necessarily sitting back and going, this is happening to me. It's like, what action can I take? And so my part of my purpose is, how can I be my best version of myself so that the people that I work with get that on an everyday basis.
mm. Which is all about taking it's about self-empowerment and self-accountability. Um, uh, Boost Your Career is all about holding agency, which is
Mm,
self-empowerment and self-accountability, with yourself, your voice, your confidence, your future. And for me, that's exactly what you're talking about there, that I'm making the connections. I'm taking responsibility and accountability for those actions, and I'm willing to take a breath, sit on the balcony for a few moments, and then move into action. And I'm convinced that people forget about the action piece of change. I think they're really good at raising awareness, having the conversations, pretty good at doing that audit that's required to make that. Getting into action, I think that's where a lot of people fall down, and particularly women, because I'm busy, I've got work, I've got home, I've got this, I've got that, and that's a nice to have. How do you keep those motivation levels up? Because it's not always easy.
no, it's not. And I think for me, it's a couple of things. One, it's being really, having frank conversations, like with my partner and my friends around, you know,
Yeah,
particularly now, like for the next 6 months, this is what that's going to look like for me. I will need to prioritize these things. How do we make that work?
yeah,
I'm not going to be able to do X, Y, and Z, but we need to plan for this. Um, Also looking after myself. So my physical health and well-being, I go out for my walk every day. I try to get the gym a number of times a week. Prioritizing that is really, really important.
mm,
And I think when you're one, clear about what you're aiming towards, two, you're having the right conversations with the right people, and you're prioritizing what you need in terms of your mental health and well-being,
mm,
the rest will fall into place. I work with a lot of people around career change or leadership development or personal growth. And to your point, when it comes to taking action, like that's always the sticking point. It's, what's your
mm.
level of commitment to do this? How
Yeah,
important is this to you? What will your life be like? What are you willing to sacrifice to
mm.
get this? And I think we often want to change, but stay in our comfort zone while we're doing it.
Yeah, where we're not prepared to stretch that bit, because it is uncomfortable when we start to do that. So, a lot of my coaching with people is all around, what are you willing to do here? Because it's great that you've made yourself aware of where you're headed and you know what you need to do. And
Yeah.
unless you do something, you actually do something, it'll be the same next week. So it's really is that whole agency, holding agency, that self accountability and self empowerment, that no one else can empower me. I have to do it myself. That I shouldn't have to have someone else hold me to account. As an adult and a professional adult, I really need to be able to hold myself to account. So I think those two concepts are crucial in terms of personal growth And funnily enough, we're back full circle. They tie neatly back with curiosity, don't they?
Mm. I think you raise a really interesting point, and the women that I work with, um, and this is a broader societal thing that I have lots of conversations about
Okay.
is, there's the expectation that, you'll sacrifice yourself to make others more comfortable. So your family, whatever their needs are. So asking for time for yourself, is considered selfish.
Sure.
And it's really around reframing, helping people reframe, well, if you're not looking after yourself, how can you be the best version for your partner, for your children, for your team, for your leader, for your
Yeah.
friends, and everyone else in your life?
Mhm.
So taking that half an hour walk or whatever it might be that fills your bucket, it's really not being selfish. It's really looking after yourself so that you can be the best
Yeah.
for others.
Best version of self. I love it. I think it's a really good note to leave people with, because no one else can create that best version but you.
Yep.
And curiosity seems to be the platform for personal growth. And we all know that personal growth is exactly what's required to move confidently into whatever the future is, or whatever the future is that you're creating. Marvelous. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. It's been, I love these talks because they literally are a conversation with women that we should be having with a glass of wine in our hand, and we're not, because we're trying to pull together concepts that will add value to people's lives. But I love everything you've talked about. I love that you've learnt to reinvent yourself, that you mentioned what got you here won't get you there. It's a really simple concept, but gee, it packs a huge punch. And the whole concept of remaining relevant by understanding blind spots. So great stuff. Thank you so much for joining me. And you'll be back. We will be having you back.
Thanks, Louise. It's been a great experience. Thanks for allowing me to share my story. Great prompter questions. I really did had to dig deep there and think, beyond the surface. So really glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you very much. Hello, Louise Phelan here, and you've been listening to yet another Boost Talk, and I know you loved it. These women are being so generous with their time and their experience and their expertise, and it's great to have their perspective on their career enhancement strategies for women in this post-pandemic hybrid workplace that we find ourselves in. So for more information, head on over to our website, boostyourcareer.com.au, and I'll see you there.